One evening, after a few drinks, I blurted out a statement that I now deeply regret. That comment has left my marriage hanging by a thread. To give a clearer picture, let me explain a little about us. My husband and I first met when we were just kids, working at a call center. At that time, we had nothing but friendship. He left to attend university, while I continued working there until I graduated from high school. 5 years later, we ran into each other again, started dating, and eventually got married. Now we have 2 children together. Present day, my husband is 27 and I am 25. Last fall, after giving birth to our second child, I started using a new birth control method. However, this medication had side effects that caused me to lose interest in sex. My husband tried to initiate, but I kept rejecting him. After 2 weeks without any progress from me, he stopped trying. A week later, I got upset and asked why he no longer made an effort. That evening, we had our first date night since the kids were born. After a few drinks, I confessed to my husband that I felt like I had betrayed him. He became worried and asked me why. I told him about a dream I had the previous week, in which an old colleague confessed that he liked me, and I told him I felt the same way. I then started scrolling through his social media, criticizing the appearance of his girlfriend. As I spoke, I couldn't control myself, sharing details about a brief fling we had when he was in college. I even described the passionate moments, when he pushed me against a wall and confessed that he desired me. My husband was furious, not just because of what I said, but because of my attitude over the past month. He felt hurt that I had stopped caring about our intimacy, yet I could talk about another man right in front of him. His anger grew even more when I suggested that we could have sex immediately. He said, "You've rejected me for weeks, but now you want to have sex after talking about another man?" Looking back, I understand why he felt that way, especially since he had been fond of me when we first met but didn't dare show it. After that, my words continued to haunt us. He began to doubt that I married him because he had graduated from university and had a stable job, and that I no longer saw him as a choice. He believed that if given the opportunity, I would cheat on him with that old colleague, and this began to tear apart our marriage. When he asked why I brought up that guy, I explained that at the time I felt confident and attractive. But now, after having 2 children, I was struggling with my body and no longer felt sexy. He couldn't accept this, and I felt desperate. Our relationship became strained. He no longer talked to me much, rarely touched me, and we hadn't had sex in almost 2 months. He even became distant with the kids. I loved him deeply, but I didn't know what to do to save our marriage. I did everything I could to show my commitment to him, like stopping bringing up the old guy, deleting him from social media, and only talking about him when my husband asked. I also started exercising with him to improve my health and show him that I was trying. However, our intimacy remained inconsistent, depending on whether he was still upset about this issue. One time, during an argument, he mentioned that I had gained weight, saying, "Do you think that guy would still look at you? You've gained too much weight." These words hurt deeply, as I had already been aware of how my body had changed after 2 pregnancies. During our fights, he repeatedly brought up the details I had shared about the old guy, like how I had complimented him on being good-looking, taller than my husband by 3 inches, and having dark hair. He also pointed out that this guy was my boss, which made me feel attracted to him at the time. I explained that these were just impulsive remarks, but it seemed that no matter how hard I tried to explain, I couldn't ease his pain. Things got even worse when I told my husband that I had dreamed about that guy again. I had made the foolish mistake of telling him, and it only made things worse. He kept asking me if I still imagined him, or if I still found him attractive. I continuously assured him that my love and attraction were only for him, but his doubts had become deeply ingrained, and it wasn't easy to erase them. Each time I tried to explain that I no longer thought about the old guy, that he was just a past memory, he would sink into his thoughts and continue criticizing me. One day, when we were fighting again, he said, "Do you think I'm weak? I've spent my whole life protecting you, but now I have to protect myself from you." Those words struck me like a slap. That evening, he didn't say anything, just sighed and went to the bedroom. I felt like everything was falling apart, and I didn't know what to do. The next morning, he wasn't home. No messages, no explanation. Just an empty space where his car would normally be. By the afternoon, I received a text from him. "I'll be home late. Don't wait for me." That felt like a slap in the face. I called him, but he answered coldly, with no emotion. That night, when he came home, everything was silent. He was like a shadow, with no anger or exhaustion, just emptiness. When I asked if he was feeling down, he replied wearily, "I'm done." That response hit me like a punch to the heart. At that moment, I realized that he wasn't just tired of me, but that he was completely drained by everything. After those words, I felt my heart shatter. He left without a word, offering no explanation, leaving behind a deep wound in my heart. I sat in the quiet room, memories of the happy days we once had swirling around me. I remember the times when he used to hold me tight, the evenings when he would spend time with the family, no matter how busy he was. I remember the feeling of being loved, being cherished, and now, it all seemed to have faded away. The entire day felt like a blur as I wandered around the house, feeling lost, as if the world had turned its back on me. What did I do wrong? How could I salvage this relationship when everything seemed to be slipping beyond my control? A few days later, he came home late, as usual. I saw his silhouette outside the door, and he still looked exhausted, not from work but from us. My heart twisted again. I opened the door and looked at him, but instead of running to hug him like I used to, I stood there, overwhelmed by a suffocating feeling. "Are you really that tired?" I asked, but my voice was weak, as though I was trying to hold on to something I couldn't control. He simply shook his head, offering no response. Then, in silence, he walked into the kitchen and grabbed a soda from the fridge. I watched him, not knowing what to do, but guilt kept creeping up on me. "Eric, I really love you," I said, my voice choking. I don't want us to end like this." He turned and looked at me, but his eyes were no longer warm. They were cold, distant, as if he had drained all his emotions from himself. "I don't know anymore, Claire," he said softly, but each word felt like a stab to my heart. "I don't feel like I matter to you anymore. You've pushed me out of your life so easily." Each word he spoke made me feel like I was falling into an abyss. What had I done to make him feel this way? What had I done to make him lose trust in my love for him? A few days later, we had a real conversation. One without arguing or shouting, but just the heavy silence of two people trying to find their way back to each other. He told me that he couldn't continue living like this, trapped in uncertainty and the feeling of betrayal. He said he needed time to think about everything, but I knew that time couldn't heal all the wounds we'd gone through. I want us to go in a different direction, not to love each other again, but to find ourselves again, to figure out who we still are after everything that's happened. He looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw a flicker of hope that had long extinguished. I felt like I was standing at a crossroads, not knowing which way to turn. Could I save this marriage? Could we get past all the pain and exhaustion? The next day, I decided to do something I never thought I would. I told him I would give him time, that both of us needed space to think and reset everything. I deleted everything related to the old guy from my life. Not because I didn't love my husband, but because I realized comparing him to someone else only hurt us more. And so, during those days, I focused on finding myself again. I joined a yoga class, started learning how to love my body, even though it had changed after having 2 kids. I wasn't the girl I used to be, but I learned to love who I was in the present. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Because if I couldn't love myself, how could I love and care for my family? My husband also had his moments of reflection. There were times he remained silent, as though searching for a reason to trust me again, to trust us. But I knew we both needed time, not to forget the pain, but to understand and feel the love we once had. One day, he came to me, not to argue, but to talk. "I can't forget what happened, but I don't want to give up. I want us to try again, once more," he said, his voice soft, almost like a promise that wasn't fully formed. And from then on, I understood that no matter how difficult life got, love still needed to be nurtured, cared for day by day. We didn't know what the future would bring, but at least we were both ready to walk forward together.